Daniel Park stared at the stack of contracts on his mahogany desk, then at his younger sister who had made herself comfortable in the leather chair across from him. It was 7 in the evening, and he'd been in back-to-back meetings since 6 that morning. His eyes burned from staring at screens. His shoulders ached, and all he wanted was to go home, pour himself a drink, and review the quarterly reports in peace. "You're not leaving until you say yes," Sophie announced, crossing her arms. She had that look on her face, the same one she'd worn when she was 8 and demanding he take her to Disneyland. He'd caved then, too. "I don't have time for this," Daniel said, not looking up from the merger agreement he was reviewing. "We're launching the new software platform in 3 weeks. The board is breathing down my neck about the expansion into Asia. I have exactly 0 hours in my schedule for whatever scheme you're cooking up. It's just dinner. 2 hours, maybe 3 if you actually enjoy yourself, which I know is a foreign concept to you." Sophie leaned forward. "Come on, Danny, when's the last time you went on a date? And I don't mean those awful business dinners where you schmooze clients while pretending to care about their golf handicaps." Daniel finally looked up, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. At 34, he'd accomplished everything he'd set out to do. He'd taken his father's struggling software company and transformed it into one of the most innovative tech firms in the country. Park Industries was worth over $2 billion now. The business magazines called him a genius, a visionary, the man with the golden touch. What they didn't write about was the price he'd paid. The friendships that had faded, the hobbies he'd abandoned, the relationships that had crumbled under the weight of his obsession with success. "I went to that charity thing last month," he offered weakly. "That doesn't count. You spent the entire evening on your phone, left after 45 minutes, and the woman you were supposed to be there with ended up getting a ride home from the valet." Sophie shook her head. "I'm not letting you turn into one of those lonely billionaires who die surrounded by money, but not a single person who actually loves them." "That's dramatic, even for you." "Is it, though?" Sophie stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. "Mom and Dad died 12 years ago. You were 22, I was 15. You gave up everything to take care of me and save the company. I get it. I'm grateful for it every single day. But Sophie graduated college, got married, started her own life. You're still here, working 80-hour weeks, eating takeout at your desk, going home to an empty penthouse." The words hit harder than Daniel wanted to admit. He turned back to his contracts, but the numbers blurred together. His sister wasn't wrong. Somewhere between building an empire and making sure Sophie had everything she needed, he'd forgotten to build a life for himself. "One dinner," Sophie pressed. "If it's terrible, you never have to do it again. I'll stop nagging. I'll tell Mom's spirit to stop haunting me about grandchildren. Just give it one honest shot." Daniel sighed, the sound of a man who knew he'd already lost. "Fine, one dinner. But I'm giving it 15 minutes tops. If there's no connection, I'm out. 30 minutes minimum, 20. Deal." Sophie grinned triumphantly. "Her name is Rachel Kim. She's a nurse at Memorial Hospital, works in the children's unit. I met her at the hospital fundraiser last month. She's funny, kind, doesn't care about money, and she's never heard of you, which I think is perfect." "Never heard of me?" Daniel wasn't sure if he should be offended or relieved. "She doesn't follow business news. She thinks tech bros are annoying. I showed her your photo and told her you were in computers, and she said you looked like you needed more sleep and fewer espressos." Sophie laughed. "I like her already. Great," Daniel thought. This would be a disaster. But he'd made a promise, and if there was one thing his parents had taught him before they died, it was that you kept your word, even when it meant sitting through an awkward dinner with a stranger who probably already thought he was an over-caffeinated workaholic. The restaurant Sophie had chosen was called Lucia's, a small Italian place in a neighborhood Daniel rarely visited. He'd sent his assistant to make a reservation, only to be told they didn't take reservations, first come, first served. When his assistant had offered to simply buy out the restaurant for the evening, Daniel had actually felt embarrassed enough to say no. If he was doing this, he'd do it like a normal person. He arrived exactly 15 minutes late, not because of traffic or work, but because he'd calculated that showing up exactly on time seemed too eager, while being more than 15 minutes late was rude. He'd changed his suit 3 times, settled on something slightly less formal, then felt ridiculous for caring. This was a favor for his sister. 20 minutes of polite conversation, then back to real life. The restaurant was cozy, with warm lighting and checkered tablecloths. It smelled incredible, like garlic and fresh bread and something tomato-based that made his stomach growl. He realized he'd skipped lunch again. When had he last eaten? Breakfast, maybe? Sophie had texted him the description. Corner table near the window wearing a green sweater. He spotted her immediately, and his first thought was that she looked nothing like what he'd expected. She wasn't dressed to impress. Her dark hair was pulled up in a messy knot, a few strands falling around her face. She was leaning over the table, completely absorbed in something, her hand moving across what looked like a napkin. As Daniel approached, he realized she was drawing, quick, confident strokes building up what looked like a cartoon character. She was so focused she didn't even notice him standing there until he cleared his throat. "Rachel?" She looked up and her eyes went wide. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not a polite giggle, but a genuine, surprised laugh that made other diners glance over. "Oh wow, you're real," she said, setting down her pen. "Your sister showed me your picture, but honestly I thought she'd grabbed it off some stock photo website. You know, generic handsome business guy number 7. No offense." Daniel stood there, completely thrown off script. In his experience, first dates usually began with nervous smiles, compliments about the restaurant choice, maybe some comment about traffic. They did not begin with the woman laughing at his existence. "Should I be offended?" he asked, surprising himself by smiling. "Probably not. I mean, you are actually here, which is more than I can say for my last 3 setups." She gestured to the chair. "Sit, please. Unless you're planning to bail immediately, which I would totally understand. Your sister really talked you up, and that kind of pressure is a lot." Daniel sat down, still processing. "She talked you up too. Did she tell you about my sparkling personality and my passion for making children smile through the trauma of medical procedures?" Rachel's tone was light, but he caught something real underneath it. "She mentioned you work with kids at the hospital. Pediatric oncology unit. It's exactly as heartbreaking and amazing as it sounds." Rachel slid the napkin across the table. "I was sketching what I imagine our theoretical future would look like if this blind date thing actually worked out. This is Chairman Whiskers, the cat we'd inevitably adopt because I have a soft spot for orange tabbies, and you look like a dog person who'd secretly love a cat." Daniel looked down at the napkin. The cartoon was actually quite good. A fluffy orange cat wearing what looked like a tiny business suit and tie. Despite himself, despite every defense mechanism he'd built over the past decade, he laughed. Really laughed. "Chairman Whiskers? All the best cats have ridiculous names. It's a requirement." Rachel studied him with open curiosity. "Your sister said you run a tech company. What kind of tech?" Here it came. The moment when she'd either get starry-eyed about the money or glaze over from boredom. "Software development, mostly. Enterprise solutions, some AI integration, cloud infrastructure management." "That means nothing to me," Rachel admitted cheerfully. "But it sounds complicated." "Do you like it?" No one ever asked him that. They asked about revenues, about market share, about what he was building next. They didn't ask if he liked it. "I do," he said slowly, realizing it was true. "I like solving problems. Taking something broken and figuring out how to fix it. Making systems work better, smoother, faster. Like puzzles," Rachel said. "Exactly like puzzles." The waiter appeared, a cheerful older man who clearly knew Rachel. "The usual, Bella? Please." "On whatever he wants," Rachel grinned at Daniel. "I come here too often. It's dangerous. Their lasagna is basically heaven in pasta form." Daniel ordered the same without looking at the menu, which would have horrified his executive team who'd watched him deliberate over business lunch orders for 20 minutes. But something about Rachel's easy confidence made him want to just go with it. "So," she said, leaning forward with her elbows on the table, "full disclosure time. My aunt works with your sister in some charity committee thing. She's been trying to set me up for months because apparently being 32 and single means there's something wrong with me. I told her this was my last blind date. After this, I'm adopting a dog and embracing my future as the eccentric neighborhood lady who decorates her house for every holiday, including Arbor Day." "I told my sister the same thing," Daniel admitted. "Well, not about the dog, or Arbor Day. But this was supposed to be my last attempt at making her stop worrying about my personal life. So we're both here under duress." "That's romantic." Rachel's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Should we just eat? Make pleasant conversation for your required 20 minutes, then go our separate ways? No harm, no foul?" Daniel glanced at his watch. He'd been here for 8 minutes. His original plan was still viable. He could eat quickly, claim an early meeting, and be home by 9 with the rest of his evening intact. His laptop was in the car. He could still get 4 hours of work done before midnight. But then Rachel started telling him about her day, how one of the kids in her unit had finished his last round of chemotherapy and celebrated by throwing pudding at the attending physician in joy, how she'd had to help clean up the mess while trying not to laugh, how the doctor had been such a good sport about it, even wore a pudding mustache for the rest of his rounds to make the other kids smile. Daniel found himself asking questions, genuinely curious about her world that was so different from his own. She told him about drawing cartoons for the kids during difficult procedures, creating characters that made them forget about needles and fear for just a few minutes. She talked about families struggling with medical bills, about parents who slept in waiting rooms, about the small victories that made the heartbreaks bearable. "Don't you find it depressing?" he asked when their food arrived. Rachel considered this while twirling pasta on her fork. "Sometimes. There are nights I go home and cry because we lost a patient. Days when I question everything. But then you get moments like today, pudding chaos and all, and you remember why it matters. These kids don't have the luxury of giving up, so neither do I. Plus, someone has to draw the cartoons. Might as well be me." She said it so simply, like it was obvious. Daniel thought about his own work, the stress he carried about profit margins and market shares. Important, yes, but suddenly feeling very abstract compared to helping sick children smile. The food was incredible, just as Rachel had promised. They talked through dinner, then somehow ended up ordering dessert, even though Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd had dessert at a restaurant. Rachel told him about growing up with 4 brothers, all of whom were now very concerned about her dating life. He told her about losing his parents, about taking over the company while trying to raise a teenage sister, about the years that had blurred together in a haze of responsibility. "That's a lot for one person," Rachel said quietly. "You were basically a kid yourself." "Someone had to do it." "Sure, but that doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Your sister seems pretty great, though. She's clearly very invested in your happiness." "Sometimes too invested," Daniel said, but he was smiling. Rachel laughed. "My brothers are the same way. Every family dinner turns into an interrogation about my love life. Last month, my youngest brother tried to set me up with his gym trainer. The guy spent our entire coffee date talking about his macros and supplement routine. I learned more about protein powder than I ever needed to know. How did it end? I faked a medical emergency, told him my pager was going off and I had to get back to the hospital immediately. Then I went home and ate ice cream while watching cooking shows. I'm not proud of it, but desperate times." Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he couldn't remember feeling in years. Rachel had a way of making everything seem lighter, easier. She didn't take herself too seriously, but he could tell she took her work very seriously. She was funny without being cruel, honest without being harsh. When she laughed at his dry observations about corporate culture, he felt 10 feet tall. They were the last customers in the restaurant. The staff was wiping down tables, stacking chairs, sending not-so-subtle signals that they'd like to close. Daniel glanced at his watch and was shocked to see it was nearly midnight. He'd been here for almost 3 hours. 3 hours. He never spent 3 hours on anything that wasn't work-related. "I should let you go," Rachel said, though she didn't move to stand. "I have an early shift tomorrow, and you probably have important business person things to do." "Meetings," Daniel confirmed. "Starting at 7. Gross, that should be illegal." She gathered her things, hesitating for a moment. "This was nice. Not as awful as I expected." "High praise," he said dryly. "I mean it, though. You're not what I thought you'd be. Less robotic. Your sister made you sound like you lived in your office and only communicated in spreadsheets." "That's fairly accurate, actually." "Then tonight was your night off from being a robot. See? Personal growth." Rachel stood, and Daniel immediately stood too, not wanting the evening to end but not sure how to prolong it. They walked out together, into the cool night air. The street was quiet, just the distant sound of traffic and the warm glow of streetlights. Rachel's car was parked nearby, a slightly beat-up Honda that had clearly seen better days. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for being unexpectedly human." "Thank you for Chairman Whiskers," Daniel replied. "And for not running away when I showed up. The night's not over yet. I could still run." But she was smiling. There was a moment, brief but electric, where Daniel thought about asking for her number, about suggesting they do this again, about admitting that the past 3 hours had been the best evening he'd had in longer than he could remember. But the words stuck in his throat, weighed down by years of choosing work over everything else, of convincing himself he didn't have room in his life for this kind of complication. Rachel seemed to sense his hesitation. "Your sister has my number," she said gently. "If you ever want to grab dinner again or coffee, or meet Chairman Whiskers when I eventually adopt him." "I'd like that," Daniel said, and meant it. She gave him a small wave and got in her car. He stood there on the sidewalk watching her taillights disappear around the corner, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Or the terrifying realization that his carefully constructed walls had just developed a crack, and it had happened over pasta and cartoons and genuine laughter. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. "Well?" Daniel typed back. "Chairman Whiskers is an orange tabby." 3 dots appeared. Then, I knew it. He walked to his own car, slid behind the wheel, and instead of immediately checking his emails like he always did, he sat there in the quiet darkness. Tomorrow he'd go back to being CEO Daniel Park, the man who lived in conference rooms and thought in quarterly reports. But tonight, for just a few hours, he'd been someone different, someone who laughed easily and stayed for dessert and forgot to check the time. And as he drove home through the empty streets, he was already thinking about when he could do it again. Daniel sat in his office the next morning, staring at the same paragraph in a contract for the 3rd time. The words kept swimming together, refusing to make sense. His mind kept wandering back to the restaurant, to Rachel's laugh, to the way she'd sketched that ridiculous cat without any self-consciousness. He'd gotten home past midnight, fully intending to work for a few hours like he always did. Instead, he'd gone straight to bed and slept better than he had in months. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your sister gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thanks again for last night. Also, I looked you up. You're kind of a big deal. Why didn't you mention the whole billionaire thing?" "Rachel?" Daniel felt his lips curve into a smile. He typed back quickly before he could overthink it. "It doesn't usually come up in conversation. Should I have led with my net worth? Seems tacky." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Fair point. Though now I feel bad that I made you split the check." They hadn't split it. He'd paid while she was in the restroom, but he wasn't about to correct her. "Next time you can treat me to that taco place you mentioned." "Bold of you to assume there's a next time." "Is there?" A longer pause this time. Daniel found himself holding his breath like a teenager. "Yeah, there is. Thursday night? I'm off at 6. Daniel pulled up his calendar, looking at the board meeting scheduled for 5, the dinner with potential investors at 7. He could reschedule the dinner. When was the last time he'd rescheduled anything for personal reasons? Never. The answer was never. Thursday works. 6:30? Perfect. Prepare yourself for the best tacos of your life. Daniel set his phone down, aware that he was grinning like an idiot. His assistant knocked and entered, raising an eyebrow at his expression. "Good news, sir. Reschedule Thursday's dinner meeting. Push it to next week. The Henderson Investment Group? They're flying in specifically for next week," Daniel repeated, his tone firm but not unkind. Family commitment. It wasn't exactly a lie. Or maybe it was. He wasn't sure what Rachel was yet, but she definitely wasn't a business obligation, and that felt significant enough to count as personal. Thursday came faster than he expected, and slower than he wanted. Daniel found himself distracted in meetings, checking his phone more than usual, mentally running through conversation topics like he was preparing for a presentation. His executive team noticed. His sister definitely noticed based on the string of excited texts and gifs she kept sending. He left the office at 5:45, something his security team seemed confused about. They were used to him leaving after 9, sometimes after midnight. Leaving while the sun was still up seemed to break some unspoken rule. Rachel had texted him an address in a neighborhood he'd never visited. The buildings were older here, colorful murals painted on walls, small shops with hand-painted signs. His driver pulled up to a food truck with a bright yellow awning that said Tio's Tacos in cheerful red letters. Rachel was already there, leaning against a picnic table, wearing scrubs and sneakers, her hair in a ponytail. She looked tired but lit up when she saw him. "You actually came," she said. "I was 50-50 on whether you'd cancel for some important CEO emergency." "I almost did," Daniel admitted, climbing out of the car. Had to reschedule a pretty significant meeting. Should I feel guilty or flattered? Definitely flattered. Those tacos better be worth it. Rachel grinned and pulled him toward the truck. The owner, a stocky man with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, greeted Rachel like family. Mija, your usual? Por favor, tío. And whatever he wants. She gestured to Daniel. Daniel looked at the menu board, overwhelmed by options he didn't recognize. Rachel leaned in close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something citrusy and clean. Trust me? She asked. Apparently I do, he said, surprising himself with how true it was. Rachel ordered in rapid Spanish, laughing at something Tio said that Daniel didn't catch. They carried their food to the picnic table, and Daniel found himself sitting on weathered wood, eating tacos from paper boats, surrounded by the sounds of the city in a way he never experienced from his corner office or penthouse apartment. So, Rachel said, biting into her taco with enthusiasm, what's it like being a big-shot tech genius? Do you get tired of people treating you differently once they know who you are? Daniel considered this while chewing. The taco was incredible, spicy and tangy and completely unlike anything he'd get at the fancy restaurants his business partners preferred. Honestly, yes, everyone wants something. An investment, a connection, a job for their cousin. Or they get weird and formal, like I'm going to judge them for using the wrong fork. He looked at her. You looked me up. Are you being weird about it? Little bit, Rachel admitted. I mean, I spent 10 minutes staring at your Wikipedia page like, this guy ate pasta with me and didn't mention he's on the Forbes list. But then I remembered you laughed at Chairman Whiskers, and I figured you can't be that full of yourself. High praise again. I have very low standards. It's why I keep agreeing to blind dates. She wiped hot sauce from her chin unselfconsciously. But seriously, doesn't it get lonely? Everyone wanting something from you. Nobody just wanting to hang out and eat tacos. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. She'd nailed it in one simple question. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. Well, for what it's worth, I make terrible money, have student loans that will outlive me, and the only thing I want from you is to see if you can handle the super spicy salsa without crying. Tio makes it himself. It's basically liquid fire. Challenge accepted, he regretted it immediately. The salsa was indeed liquid fire. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly fell off the bench as he chugged the entire bottle of water Tio had thoughtfully provided. You tried to warn me, Daniel gasped. I really did. But you have that stubborn CEO thing going on. I'm learning about you, Daniel Park. They talked until the food truck started closing down, then kept talking while walking through the neighborhood. Rachel pointed out her favorite bookstore, the community center where she volunteered to teach art classes on weekends, the park where she ran every morning before her shifts. She showed him her world without apology, and Daniel found himself fascinated by how different it was from his own. I live about 10 minutes from here, Rachel said as they circled back toward where his car was waiting. Want to see my apartment? Fair warning, it's tiny and my roommate has a cat who hates everyone. Daniel knew he should say no. He had work to do, reports to review, emails piling up. But he heard himself say, I'd love to. Rachel's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with creaky stairs and walls thin enough to hear neighbors' conversations. It was small like she'd warned, but every inch was covered in color. Paintings on the walls, most of them clearly her own work, plants on every surface, photographs pinned to a corkboard showing Rachel with various kids, all of them smiling despite hospital gowns and IV poles. This is Nicole, Rachel said, gesturing to a woman sprawled on the couch watching a cooking show. My roommate and favorite person. Nicole, this is Daniel. Nicole looked up, gave him a quick once-over, then returned to her show. You're the billionaire. Rachel showed me your picture. You look more normal in person. Thanks, Daniel said. Nicole's a teacher, Rachel explained. She has no filter and takes exactly zero nonsense from anyone. It's why we're friends. Someone has to balance out your tendency to see the best in everyone, Nicole said. Did you warn him about Mr. Pickles yet? As if summoned, an enormous gray cat emerged from a bedroom, took one look at Daniel and hissed. That's Mr. Pickles. He's suspicious of men because Nicole's ex-boyfriend was terrible. Mr. Pickles has excellent judgment. Rachel scooped up the cat, who immediately began purring in her arms. He'll warm up to you eventually, will he? Daniel asked, eyeing the cat who was now glaring at him with open hostility. Probably not, Nicole said cheerfully. He still hates the mailman after 3 years. But Rachel likes you, so that counts for something. Rachel shot her roommate a look, but she was blushing. Daniel felt absurdly pleased. They ended up on Rachel's tiny balcony, barely big enough for 2 folding chairs, looking out over the neighborhood. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. From here, Daniel could see the city skyline in the distance, including his own office building. "That's where I spend most of my time," he said, pointing to the glass tower. "Looks lonely from here," Rachel observed. "It is." He turned to look at her. "This week has been strange. I keep thinking about our dinner, about the tacos tonight, about how different everything feels when I'm with you." Rachel shifted in her chair to face him fully. "Different good or different scary?" "Both," Daniel admitted. "I haven't done this in a long time. Dating, I mean. Letting someone in. After my parents died, I just shut everything down except work and taking care of Sophie. It was easier that way, simpler. Simpler isn't always better, though." "No," he agreed. "It's not." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Daniel felt his phone buzzing in his pocket. Probably urgent messages from his team, but for the first time in years he didn't reach for it. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said eventually. "And you can tell me if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. Do you actually enjoy your life? Like, not the success or the money or the achievement, but the day-to-day living part." No one had ever asked him that before. Daniel thought about his penthouse that felt more like a hotel than a home. The dinners he ate alone at his desk. The weekends spent working. The hollow feeling that had become so normal he'd stopped noticing it. "Not really," he said honestly. "I'm good at what I do. I'm proud of what I've built. But enjoy it? I don't think I've enjoyed much of anything in a long time." "That's really sad, Daniel." "I know." Rachel reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. It was such a simple gesture, but Daniel felt it like an electric shock. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think you've been so busy proving you could handle everything that you forgot to actually live. And I get it. When something terrible happens, we build walls to protect ourselves. But walls don't just keep the bad stuff out. They keep the good stuff out too. When did you get so wise? I work with kids who are fighting for their lives. They don't waste time on things that don't matter. They taught me that every moment counts, even the small ones. Especially the small ones." She squeezed his hand. "This moment right here. This counts. The tacos counted. Your sister forcing you on that blind date counted. It's all the small moments that make up a life worth living." Daniel felt something crack open inside him. Something he'd kept locked away for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "I want more moments like this," he said quietly. "With me specifically, or just in general?" Rachel's tone was light, but he could see vulnerability in her eyes. "With you specifically." Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that made her whole face light up. "Good answer." They stayed on that tiny balcony until the air grew cold and Rachel started shivering. Daniel offered her his jacket and she wrapped it around herself like a blanket. When he finally left, promising to text her tomorrow, she walked him down to where his car was waiting. "Your driver's been sitting there for 3 hours," Rachel said, waving apologetically at the car. "He's paid well," Daniel said, though he made a mental note to give the man a bonus. "Still, that's dedication." Rachel hesitated, then stood on her toes and kissed his cheek quickly. "Thanks for tonight, for the vulnerability and the honesty, for trying the death salsa, for all of it." Daniel touched his cheek where her lips had been, feeling completely off balance in the best possible way. "Can I see you this weekend?" "I work Saturday, but Sunday's free." "Sunday, then. I'll plan something." "Nothing too fancy," Rachel warned. "I'm a simple tacos and conversation kind of girl. I'm learning that about you." As his car pulled away, Daniel looked back to see Rachel still standing on the sidewalk. His jacket wrapped around her shoulders, waving. He waved back, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of happiness. Or the terrifying realization that this woman in scrubs with paint under her fingernails and a hostile cat had managed to get past every defense he'd built in 12 years. His phone was full of messages. Urgent emails. Questions from his team. But instead of diving into them like he normally would, Daniel opened a new text to Rachel. "Already planning Sunday. Fair warning. It might involve more terrible decisions like death salsa." Her response came immediately. "Bring it on, billionaire boy. I'm tougher than I look." Daniel smiled at his phone, then looked out the window at the city passing by. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't thinking about quarterly projections or market shares or the next big deal. He was thinking about a woman who saw past his net worth to the person underneath, who challenged him to actually live instead of just survive, who made him laugh and think and feel things he'd convinced himself he didn't have time for. And the most terrifying, exhilarating part, he wanted more, so much more. His executive assistant called as he pulled up to his building. "Sir, about the Henderson meeting. Schedule it for next Tuesday," Daniel interrupted. "And block out my Sundays from now on." "Personal time," a pause. "Personal time, sir?" "Yes, personal time. It's a new policy I'm implementing." He thanked his driver and headed into his building, still smiling. Starting now. For the first time in 12 years, Daniel Park had something to look forward to that had nothing to do with business. And as he rode the elevator up to his empty penthouse, he found himself already counting down the hours until Sunday. Sunday morning. Daniel woke up at 5:30 like always, his internal alarm clock refusing to acknowledge weekends. But instead of immediately reaching for his laptop, he lay in bed thinking about the day ahead. He'd planned something for Rachel, something he hoped would surprise her, something that had nothing to do with expensive restaurants or trying to impress her with money. He'd asked Sophie for help, which had resulted in his sister screaming so loudly over the phone that he'd had to hold it away from his ear. "You're taking her to the community center? To volunteer? Daniel Park, are you actually becoming a human being with feelings?" "Don't make a big deal out of it," he'd said, though he was smiling. Too late. "I'm already texting Mom's spirit. She's probably doing backflips in heaven." Now, as he got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt that felt strange after a week of tailored suits, Daniel felt nervous in a way that board meetings never made him nervous. This mattered. Rachel mattered. And he was terrified of messing it up. He picked her up at 9, and she came downstairs wearing paint-stained overalls and her hair in 2 braids, looking about 20 years old. "You said casual," she said, catching his expression. "Did I misunderstand the assignment?" "No, you're perfect. I mean, the outfit is perfect. You look great." Daniel fumbled with his words like a teenager, which seemed to delight her. "Where are we going? You've been very mysterious about this plan. You mentioned you volunteer at the community center on weekends. I thought maybe I could join you." He watched her face carefully. "Is that weird? I can take you somewhere else if... Are you serious right now?" Rachel's eyes went wide. "You want to spend your Sunday volunteering with me? I mean, you made it sound interesting. And I thought it might be nice to see what you do. Unless you think it's a terrible idea." Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. "I think it's possibly the sweetest thing anyone's ever done for me. But fair warning, it's messy. We're doing an art project with kids today. You'll probably get paint everywhere. I'll risk it." The community center was in the same neighborhood as Rachel's apartment, a building that had clearly seen better days but buzzed with energy. Kids were everywhere, running and laughing, their voices echoing off the walls. Rachel was greeted like a celebrity, children swarming around her, all talking at once. Miss Rachel, are we painting today? Can I use the glitter? My mom said I could stay extra long today." Rachel laughed and waded through them, introducing Daniel to each kid. There were about 15 children, ranging from maybe 6 to 12 years old. Some he recognized from the photos in her apartment. Kids she'd worked with at the hospital who were now healthy enough to be here. "Everyone, this is my friend Daniel. He's going to help us today. Can we make him feel welcome?" A small girl with thick glasses looked up at him skeptically. "Are you good at art?" "Terrible," Daniel admitted. "That's okay. Miss Rachel says art is about having fun, not being perfect." The girl grabbed his hand with paint-covered fingers. "Come on, I'll show you what we're doing." They were painting a mural on one of the center's walls, a giant collaborative piece that the kids had been working on for weeks. It was chaos in the best possible way. Paint everywhere, kids arguing cheerfully about color choices, music playing from a beaten-up stereo in the corner. Rachel moved through it all like a conductor, encouraging the shy ones, gently redirecting the over-enthusiastic ones, making sure everyone felt included. Daniel found himself painting clouds, following the careful instructions of the girl with glasses whose name was Lily. She was a perfectionist, correcting his brushstrokes with the seriousness of an art professor. No, clouds are softer. Like this, see? She demonstrated with confident strokes. "You have to feel it, not think it." "Feel it, not think it," Daniel repeated, trying again. "Better. You're learning." Across the room, Rachel was painting with a group of kids, all of them laughing at something. She had paint in her hair, on her face, streaked across her overalls. She looked completely in her element, and Daniel felt his chest tighten watching her. This was what she'd meant about moments that mattered. This room full of noise and color and joy, this was living. A boy of about 10 appeared at Daniel's elbow. "Miss Rachel says you're rich." I guess so." "Like how rich?" "Video game console rich or swimming pool rich?" Daniel considered. More than that, the boy's eyes went wide. "Well, do you have a butler?" "No butler. Just a really patient assistant who manages my schedule. That's basically a butler." The boy picked up a brush. "I'm going to be rich someday too. I'm going to invent a robot that does homework." "That's a solid business plan," Daniel said seriously. "What's your name?" "Kevin. I'm going to be in Miss Rachel's unit last year. She's the best. She drew me a whole comic book about a superhero who fought cancer cells. I still have it." Daniel glanced over at Rachel, who was now being attacked by several kids trying to paint her face. She was laughing, completely unconcerned about her appearance, making silly faces to make them laugh harder. "She is the best," Daniel agreed quietly. By noon, the mural was taking shape, a vibrant explosion of color showing a neighborhood scene with houses, trees, people, and what appeared to be a dragon flying overhead because one of the kids insisted every mural needed a dragon. Daniel had paint under his fingernails, on his jeans, somehow in his hair. He was pretty sure his $5,000 watch now had green paint on it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cared so little about something getting ruined. They broke for lunch, pizza that Rachel had ordered, eating on the floor with the kids sprawled around them. Kevin sat next to Daniel, asking him questions about technology and business with the intense curiosity of someone who actually cared about the answers. "Do you like your job?" Kevin asked through a mouthful of pizza. It was almost the same question Rachel had asked him. Daniel thought about his answer. "I'm starting to think I like it more when I make time for other things too," he said. "Like this." "This is pretty great." "Yeah," Kevin agreed. "Miss Rachel says balance is important. She says you can't only do one thing or you'll forget what it's like to be happy." "Miss Rachel is very smart." "The smartest," Kevin said loyally. After lunch, parents started arriving to pick up their kids. Daniel watched as Rachel talked to each parent, giving updates on how their children were doing, sharing little moments from the day. She knew everyone's names, remembered details about their lives, made each person feel seen and valued. One mother pulled Rachel aside, speaking in a low voice. Daniel couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw Rachel's expression shift to concern, then determination. She hugged the woman, said something that made her smile, then turned to wave goodbye as the mother left with her son. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked when the last child had been picked up and they were cleaning up the paint supplies. Rachel sighed. "That's Tommy's mom. They're struggling with medical bills from his treatment. She works 2 jobs, but it's still not enough. She was apologizing for not being able to afford the donation for today's supplies." She scrubbed at a paint stain on the table. "I told her not to worry about it, that we always have enough supplies, but I could tell she felt bad." "How much are the donations usually?" "Like $10 or $20 per kid. It's not much, but it helps buy supplies. Some families can afford it, some can't. We make it work." She looked up at him. "Sorry, that probably sounds like nothing to you. Your watch probably costs more than our entire annual art budget. Actually, I was thinking I'd like to donate. For the supplies. All of them for the year. However much you need." Rachel straightened up, studying his face. "Daniel, you don't have to do that just because. I'm not doing it to impress you. Well, maybe a little," he admitted with a small smile. "But mostly I'm doing it because those kids deserve to have art supplies without their parents worrying about the cost. And because you deserve to not have to choose between buying paint and buying brushes." Rachel's eyes got suspiciously shiny. "You're going to make me cry in this community center." "Please don't, I'm terrible with crying." She laughed and wiped her eyes. "Too late. These are happy tears, though." "Thank you. Really, this will make such a huge difference." They finished cleaning up in comfortable silence, occasionally bumping into each other in the small supply closet, trading smiles. When everything was put away, Rachel locked up the center and they walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. "I have paint in places I didn't know paint could reach," Rachel said, examining her arms. "This is going to take 3 showers to get off. Worth it, though. Completely worth it." She turned to face him, blocking his path on the sidewalk. Can I say something sappy? Go ahead. Most guys I've dated want to take me to fancy places to show off. You took me to a food truck and a community center. You got paint all over your expensive clothes and let a 10-year-old critique your cloud painting technique. You asked questions and actually listened to the answers. You didn't check your phone once in 4 hours. She stepped closer. You're not what I expected, Daniel Park. Is that good or bad? It's really, really good. Rachel reached up and touched his face, her paint-stained fingers gentle on his cheek. I'm falling for you. Is that too much too soon? Should I not have said that? Daniel's heart was hammering. No, I'm glad you said it. Because I'm falling for you too. Have been since you laughed at me for looking like a stock photo. Rachel grinned. That was a strong opening moment. The strongest. They stood there on the sidewalk, paint-covered and happy, while the city moved around them. Daniel wanted to kiss her, had wanted to kiss her for days now. But something held him back. Some old instinct that said he'd just mess it up, that he didn't deserve this kind of happiness. Rachel seemed to sense his hesitation. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. I'm not good at this. At being open, at letting people in. What if I screw this up? You probably will, Rachel said matter of fact. I'll probably screw it up too. That's what people do. We're messy and complicated and we make mistakes. She took both his hands in hers. But the thing is, I'd rather have messy and real with you than perfect and fake with someone else. So we'll figure it out together, okay? Okay, Daniel said and meant it. Good. Now take me to get ice cream. All this emotional vulnerability has made me hungry. And I know a place that makes the best mint chocolate chip in the city. The ice cream shop was a tiny hole-in-the-wall place with a line out the door despite the fall chill in the air. They waited in line like everyone else, Rachel waving to people she knew, Daniel content to just stand beside her. When they finally got their ice cream, they walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench watching kids play on the playground. This is my perfect Sunday, Rachel said, licking her ice cream cone. Good company, sugar, sunshine, and the satisfaction of knowing we made 15 kids happy today. No complaints here. Daniel took a bite of his ice cream. Though Lily was very critical of my artistic abilities. Lily is critical of everyone's artistic abilities. She's going to be a famous art critic someday, just you wait. Rachel smiled at the memory. She was so sick when she first came to the hospital. I didn't think she'd make it. But she's a fighter. They all are. It must be hard working with sick kids. Doesn't it break your heart? Every single day, Rachel admitted. But it also fills my heart back up, you know? For every loss, there are 10 victories. For every bad day, there are 100 good moments. Kevin with his robot dreams, Lily getting to paint again, Tommy's mom trying so hard to give her son a normal childhood. It matters. Even when it hurts, it matters. Daniel thought about his own work, the deals and acquisitions and profit margins. I've spent 12 years building a company, making money, creating success, but I don't think I've mattered to anyone the way you matter to those kids. That's not true. I bet you matter to your employees, to your sister, to the people who use whatever it is your company makes. Software platforms for enterprise clients, Daniel said. Not exactly changing the world. Maybe not in the same way, but you're providing jobs, creating solutions, building something. That counts too. Rachel bumped his shoulder with hers. Plus, you're donating to art programs now. That's pretty world-changing for 15 kids and their families. You're very good at making me feel better about myself. It's one of my many talents. I'm also excellent at parallel parking and can recite all the state capitals in alphabetical order. I'm a catch, basically. Daniel laughed, the sound coming easier now. You really are. They sat on that bench until the sun started setting, talking about everything and nothing. Rachel told him about her childhood with 4 overprotective brothers, about her parents who'd immigrated from Korea before she was born, about how she'd known she wanted to be a nurse since she was 8 years old, and her grandmother had been hospitalized. Daniel told her about his parents, about the car accident that had taken them, about the terror of being 22 and suddenly responsible for everything. I became obsessed with control after that, he admitted. If I could just work hard enough, plan well enough, prepare for every possibility, then nothing bad could happen again. But it doesn't work like that, does it? No, Rachel said softly. Life is unpredictable, scary, beautiful, messy, all at once. The only thing we can control is how we show up for it. How do you stay so positive? After everything you've seen? Everything you deal with? Rachel considered this, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I don't think I'm positive exactly. I'm realistic. Bad things happen. People get sick. Life is hard. But good things happen too. Kids recover. Parents find strength they didn't know they had. Strangers show kindness. Billionaires volunteer at community centers and let children paint their designer jeans. She smiled at him. I choose to pay attention to the good stuff too, not just the bad. That's all. Daniel felt something shift inside him, like a locked door finally opening. I want to learn how to do that. To see the good stuff. To actually live instead of just working. Well, lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher. Fair warning though, my teaching methods involve a lot of tacos, questionable art projects, and general chaos. I'm starting to appreciate chaos. Character growth. I love to see it. Rachel checked her phone and groaned. I should probably head home. Early shift tomorrow and I need to depaint myself. Daniel drove her back to her apartment, neither of them wanting the day to end, but both knowing it had to. When they pulled up outside her building, Rachel unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately get out. Thank you for today, she said. For volunteering, for the donation, for just being there. You were really great with the kids. Kevin wants me to invest in his homework robot, see? You're already making connections. Rachel hesitated, then leaned over and kissed him. Not on the cheek this time, but a real kiss, soft and sweet and over too quickly. Daniel sat there stunned while Rachel opened the door and climbed out. Text me when you get home, she called back. And Daniel? This thing we're doing? I like it. A lot. Me too, he managed to say. A lot. He watched her disappear into her building, then sat in his car for a long moment, touching his lips and feeling like the world had shifted on its axis. Somewhere in the past few weeks, between pasta and tacos and paint-covered children, he'd started to remember what it felt like to be happy, to want something more than success. To let someone in past all the carefully constructed walls, it was terrifying. But as he drove home through the city streets, Daniel found himself smiling. Because for the first time in 12 years, he wasn't thinking about what he had to do tomorrow or what problems he had to solve. He was thinking about when he'd see Rachel again, about the paint still under his fingernails, about how Kevin's mom had hugged him when she'd picked up her son and whispered, "Thank you for staying." Maybe this was what Rachel meant about moments that mattered. Not the big achievements or the impressive accomplishments, but these small, perfect pieces of connection that added up to something real. And maybe, just maybe, Daniel was ready to stop hiding from that. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a different world. Daniel found himself leaving work at reasonable hours, something his executive team still couldn't quite process. He'd have dinner with Rachel on her nights off, sometimes at restaurants, more often at her tiny apartment where they'd cook together, while Mr. Pickles supervised with obvious disapproval. The cat still hated him, which Rachel found endlessly entertaining.